Time to get weird. It's time to do a weird exotic update on the back half. There's still noise because it's a work day and we're checking on the exotic. But on a serious note, I wanted to kind of get up to date on the rear chassis and the back half. Sometimes it's nice to peel this thing back. I've been just peeling back the back of the cover here, but I'd rather just send the whole thing so we can look at it and get a refresh. So one of the challenges with this thing is placing things in an order where you can get all the shape and the structure in the right place. It's a lot of layers, and it's not just like build tubes, add a plate mount, add a gusset. Like there's a lot, I would almost say an extreme amount of shape and surface changes and structure in this thing where you really have to plot almost everything out to be able to build accordingly, where it's all tailored to all the components and all the packaging. So kind of get you guys through where we're at and what I've been doing to get there, and where we need to go next on this thing, just to get you up to speed, and then we'll keep trucking along on it, no pun intended. So this is what we got right now. Thinking back on last time, we had just these tubes, the Jungle Gym tubes in. I don't think we had any of the top portion of the chassis structure there in. The radiator might have been hanging out. The tires were, I don't think they were on. We did have all the lower portion done though, I remember that. So just thinking like where to start with this thing or how to digest it. That's what I'm getting at with this, is there's a lot of stuff, you know, like you can see the U-joints of the drive shaft, the exhaust, the sway bar, they all have to be positioned in a way to keep building all the shapes and the structure, because everything, just like a engineer, like a, you know, hypercar or something, everything is very tightly knit and it's all designed to kind of work through the packaging. So that's where we're at. I can kind of get into it. I guess I'm pressing on that because that's been my biggest, or at least most strenuous part of this, is just like setting everything in there just to build something, and then taking it all out, building stuff, then putting stuff back, and just doing that repetitive pattern to make sure and ensure that all the design is right and it's all corresponding with the packaging. So that's where we're at right now. What do we talk about first? I can talk about kind of the order that I needed to do this. I knew that the outriggers, we did these last time. This is like a rolled 2-inch tube. So even though it doesn't necessarily look like it's rolled, it is rolled, because if you started, you know, once you start shaping this thing, you will, if it's just straight with a bend, it's not gonna have that organic look to it. Organic meaning like natural, not like man-made. And kind of like the B pillar is in here, it's the same thing. Here, check that thing out. So same kind of thing, like just wanted organic shapes in here. I mean, obviously there's angle to them, but tying this stuff in, the move felt right. And you can kind of see it from here too. It is rolled with a bend in it. And I knew that that was gonna turn into like the sculpted structural areas that we have here. So it just made sense. But moving forward on that, there's a really prominent feature, which is this, call it a rear upper bulkhead. Really just pulled that one off the top, and we'll probably revise that. But the front of the truck has a front cross member, like a upper bulkhead cross member part that houses the bypasses and ties in the chassis from the driver to the passenger side. So same with back here, we're gonna have that same feature. And when I originally sketched it, these are some of the drawings. When I originally, and I mean, it's interesting to look just because these are so primitive now, and I've been sketching so much more that it's already kind of changed quality. So you can see that there's a plate structure that comes off of this sculpted down tube area. The plate structure has two fifis that have mounting locations here, and what the mounting locations are doing is they're holding a big cross member that's spanning the width of the down tubes. The middle portion of the cross member will be used as a radiator hold down. It'll have three uses. So it'll be a radiator hold down, it'll be a saddle or a stop for the upper spare tire, and it'll have a pocket that's integrated into one of the mounting locations or the side bolts for the spare tire hold down, which we're not going to do a strap. We're going to have some kind of a custom hold down. And I always liked like old school, like the 1-inch chrome tube, like spare tire hold downs that aren't a strap. There's like some billet mechanisms that Leduc used to make. But we're going to do something custom here. I mean, clearly custom, but something different that's not just going to be like a 1-inch tube or a strap. So what I'm getting at is that's a feature, like a key feature of the truck. And the other primary thing is that ties each side together as a cross section. So it's a integral part of the rigidity of the chassis too. These were like my concept references. So once you start going on this thing, stuff changes. One thing for sure that changed a lot of the shape here is there's a lot of runoff here of where this thing used to go to the chassis, the pre-existing stuff. So there's extra shit here that doesn't need to be here. And what that does is if we keep that there, that hinders the fuel cell capacity. And we are going for as much capacity as we can get due to the constraints that we're going for in the construction of building it. So I chopped 4.5, 5 inches off this thing just to start building from there instead of dragging that thing all the way out, so then we can have our cell on each side take up more space going towards the center of the truck. I have the radiator just kind of laying on one of the planes of the chassis, the X there. The radiator is going to lean back more, but I wanted to give it some, like if I have it kicked in there, it makes the space tighter for the drive shaft. Where I can guarantee that I have space, and then I have like 3/8 standoffs under there from the end of the fans to the drive shaft, just to ensure that there's enough space. This is that upper structural plate area. You might be able to see it from this area here, but recessed in this, it doubles. So there's 3/4 bolts in here. These are just like an aircraft 12 point. It doubles as like a aesthetic feature. So that's the whole name of the game here, is like functional design. So this is all set and squared into the chassis, and a lot of this stuff takes time, but with this process I had to build these portions here, they're exact per side, and then square them into the chassis, but fixture them in the chassis where I could still add other things like this tube, like the upright, and then start building this out. So there's like so many different things I have to have in place just to get one step in. So weird. It's so weird, dude. It's not. I say that because I'm insecure, but I do trust the process with this thing, and I trust all the shapes, and I trust the design, and I know where we're going. Anyways, this portion just needed to be there. There's obviously a top cap here, side caps. This is all welded. I'll go over it again just with a final pass. It's got like a clean bevel in there, so that's going to ensure a really nice cover pass. The mounting surfaces on the inside here where this structure is going to bolt are established. I want to get everything fabricated, get this thing welded. Once it's all welded up and complete, where we're not going to put any more heat into it, where it's going to expand or contract or anything, scan this, add the tube structure here, scan this, have this drawn up for carbon fuel cells, and we'll digitally draw that thing, get that done, and then I can start working on the truck more. But there's just an order of these things. that has to be done. We'll talk about some of the exterior appointments like this right now, and then I will dissect this thing because I have to do that anyways to work on the sections that I'm working on. Again, these are kind of conceptual. They're not spot on to what's here, but they get the point across and they get the vibe with where we're going to go. This shows a structural sculpted piece here. Pretty solid there. Big diameter or major axis in the front and minor axis in the rear, just like streamlined tubing. Same kind of thing you can see on this guy. So same thing, this is a pretty prominent structure here. There's going to be like a cutout in here with a channel for the exhaust to run all the way to the back. So that's some stuff I need to establish before I could keep building here and building on that plate structure like I was talking about. So we'll go into that right now. So you can see we had the 2-inch in there before. Just like this is 2-inch with 3/4 with 90 chromoly plate on each side. So the outer skin on this is done, almost as a proof of concept, but to also establish the profile and the structure where I can keep building. You can see like that. That's a real proof of concept, which is actually going to be, that will be the whole finish on this whole piece. Inside and outside will be completely blended and finished, same as our guys here. So even in this lower area, you know, from the straying from the drawings, like I've put a lot of consideration into the shape of this thing and making sure that it looks like an organic piece instead of just like a bent tube and a parallel smaller bent tube and this and that. And it, you know, thinking about how it's going to look in the long run, like even with figuring out the spread from this tube to the other tube, that's stuff I have to consider, because once you blend all this together, then the width gets way crazier than you anticipate. And I kind of learned that with the B pillars first, and then really took it into consideration with the down tubes. So it's the same thing with this. There's a taper that starts here, and then there's a kick. And then on top of that, you know, it's like this is so much plate, it's almost, you know, I used to call my old Beth truck, the back half, I call it artistic diarrhea. And I think there's a place for plate work, and I think that there's definitely a way to do too much of it or kind of abuse it. So this is like a breakup. This is what you'd call like a graphic breakup here. So, I mean, this is actually plate work welded on both pieces. Like it would add integrity and structure and rigidity to this thing. I don't think you need it. But that kind of just breaks up this big space. And also we can put like a runway or a taxi light in here. Another thing too, on these corners, there's treatment now where it's a gusset. This is your outermost edge. It's still not anywhere past the leading edge of the tire, but it is definitely the corner of the vehicle, which would take any kind of rock, debris. I don't know if you're gonna get impact there, but you definitely could kick stuff up or hit stuff. So this is almost like a splitter here, and it ties all this junction together. You have all of the structure of the Corsair tail on here. You have the structure of the tube coming down, and then you have all the junctions coming into it. So it's kind of a megaplex there of tube junctions. So this it not only doubles as like a protective guard, but it's also just like a tie-in gusset, and that's all 125 chromoly plate. Another thing I wanted to do, and that's why you see like the tin work in here, this is just another, like what I call a proof of concept. So just seeing something visually while you're working that can solidify what shapes are gonna live there later down the road. And what this is this would be your fuel cell. Kind of just rough dimensions, figuring out where the brakes are gonna be, the shapes, figuring out where that wall's gonna go. All this information I need to build other things. And that's always the name of the game with building these things, is just the more information you have with any part of them, the more efficient you can build them. So the cutout is reminiscent of what we're gonna do with the fuel cell. I'm gonna grab a straight edge. So, you know, like we did this before, but we're, you know, the profile of the fuel cell, it goes up to here. Another thing that, you know, to consider is like, well, how do you determine this? And this is all stuff I think about where I want to figure out the height. Like where do I want this tube to start? That's going to be the structure here, which is in this drawing. So you can see there's a tube structure coming off the crest of that thing. And it's the same kind of thing. That gives me a good perimeter. If you look on these, there's another tie-in where that tube is. So it's figuring out where, because that tube is going to set the profile for the fuel cell too. So anyways, we did this before. You can kind of see again, like this height is here for a reason, to kind of get that plane change and that downward slope towards the rear where there's tension. But you know, if I made this too low, then we're cutting out capacity and we're cutting out design, because then I'm not going to be able to get that nice lowering plane towards the rear of the truck. And this is going to all kind of follow here. You know, the fuel cell will register into this thing. It'll all come across, go down. And then what we have here, this is going to be that channel right here where the exhaust will come through and run all the way into the rear. We are kind of aiming to have the exhaust exit. Like there's a couple supercars and Ferraris that I've seen where they exit. The exhaust almost runs to the corner plane of the rear of the car, where it's like a horizontal cut and a vertical into the exhaust. And I want to be able to bank on something like that. So that being said, like all that design has to be taken into consideration with building everything. And that's why I extended the exhaust. The exhaust that runs, you know, all the headers complete. It's got its mufflers under there. It's going through the tunnel of the truck. It's going through an X pipe behind the rear AC box, and it's going up over the upper links, kind of running parallel with the plane of the chassis there where that X is. And I extended it. So now I've added right about here through, kept the symmetry, bumping under the chassis, going above the housing, and then back into its home here. And that's the same that it's drawn. I'll try not to keep repeating myself with this about putting all this stuff in place to get answers and information for building, but it's the same thing. So there's a V-band in here that's going to be for servicing this portion of the exhaust. You have to think about too where you're putting the V-bands. How does the exhaust come apart? How easy is it to get apart with the vehicle put together? Do you have to take key components off just to get the exhaust apart? Is the exhaust blocking stuff? Is everything going to cycle? Where's everything going to go? Are the tires going to hit when it articulates? When it bumps, is that going to get close? Everything is like a very careful calculation here when the packaging is tailored to the vehicle. So same thing, like I have this thing kicked out. The exhaust will go up. It'll come in, run to the back. Right? So that's all in here. That's why this cut is here, to make sure the proportions are okay, where I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot or not have enough room. And then that goes the same with like the sway bar. Whoa, it's not the sway bar. That goes the same with the drive shaft mounting, the spare drive shaft, and the sway bar. So I think what we'll do is take the tires off, and then I'll kind of show you what else is hiding in there and start taking stuff off so I can show you under here. So this thing, feel like it's naked right now, but what you can see here before I pull it off, this is a 10,500 pound super winch. It is structurally mounted in the dead center of the chassis. The plan with this is to have some nylon strip. It self-centers itself in here, but it's going to go under, go right to the back here, and we're going to have it clip in. The fair lead will clip in. When you want it, you'll get a quick release pin or some kind of pinned lock mechanism to pull this thing down and use it. That's going to be refined once we flip the truck over. I just needed to get all the mounts and everything squared. Again, getting a winch like that squared and centered into the chassis is another monster. So it's good to just kind of check some of this stuff off. You can see where the drive shaft lives under there. I think we had that there last time, but it was just rough. Now it's a formal mock-up. where it's not going to move. So another thing you can kind of see is the exhaust. Obviously it's going to look a little different because there's a start of routing past that V-band on the passenger side. But you know, bringing the routing through here, there's just one place that it fits above the axle and kind of through the intersections there, and then plotting for its exit out of the plate structures here. So it's all part of it. You can see the sway bar's kind of got its home too. It's a big wide guy. Whoa, my favorite, I guess. You can just see like the Clarke, that's holding the sleeve here. And then there's this runoff here is just, you know, your bushing, and then your actual material of your take up of the sway bar arm that's going to be on here. So it's all square. It's got hose clamp with a saddle here in this junction. We'll tie this tube into this junction, but this is kind of just your standoff for the tires, and also to keep this registered here. Once that cross member's in, that's where you'll really see the tie-in of the chassis. I want to get the winch off, and then I'm going to take the drive shaft off and the radiator, and we'll kind of see the real bare bones of this thing. Like I said, I think it's worth doing an update like this. But man, it's just like, it's so like half finished and naked. I feel very vulnerable showing it. It's a weird thing. I don't know why that even feels that way, but it is what it is. It's a challenge for me too, because I love instant gratification and, you know, getting that satisfaction quickly, and a build like this and like this design and package back here, it is work and it's a process just like everything, but it's a big one where you have to really trust the process. You have to trust the drawings and trust the vision and trust the functionality of what you're doing so you can see it through. Once this thing has the tube structure going around and kind of holstering the tires, the spares, once that's in here, once this is completely finished out, once the plate structures are done here, it'll really be profound. And I think once the fuel cells are in each side, then that's where it's really going to feel finished. And no matter what, it's going to look like big gnarly outriggers on the side of this thing until there's an actual fuel cell in here. So it's kind of interesting with like even the winch mount. I knew it needed to float right there. The control module for the winch is off of it, and we'll mount that remotely somewhere. It doesn't need to like actually be attached. It's also a cool winch. Super Winch it's also a really cool winch feature that now, and I don't know because I don't do crawler shit or any stuff like that, but these are Bluetooth too, so you can activate this thing on your phone. Super Winch is working with us with a couple builds in the shop, so it's a no-brainer to have their stuff on here. But what I was getting at is like with this, you can see the shapes and the symmetry. If you look at like the upper link mounts on the housing and the tie-in, I mean, they really get along good with each other, and it's just something that, you know, it's like a product of its environment. Just working around it, your eyes naturally start to take in the shapes and the angles and make things, you know, correspond with each other. So this is all a 3/16 plate structure here. I mean, it's got a lot of work into it. So that's something you'll never see that's nestled back there. And that's kind of the perch for the winch. One thing I'd like to do back here, the trans cooler is a really large one. The radiator is obviously pretty big, but build them on a substructure so it's not just like little brackets and trinketry per cooler. It's on like its own cradle, almost like powertrain for a car would be, where it'd come out the bottom. But instead this will have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 locations. We take the machined saddle off this thing or the hold down, and then you literally just pop 4 bolts, and you know, you get another guy and you just lift this stuff out, pop all the wiggins off of them, and then you just lift it out, and it's like a modular unit instead of just trying to line up little holes and do the typical fashion with these things. One of the things while the drive shaft's in here to think about is if you're gonna have this drive shaft be a spare, like obviously the truck's bumped, so the wheel and the tire will be lower, so it's not gonna collide there. We have appointments for the fenders, just that. You know what I'm saying? But the drive shaft, if you've ever tried to slide something in like that and it doesn't, like you're trying to get it to register and it's got weight on it, the leverage just gets worse and worse and you can never center it. So there's some pilot holes in the side plates. The drive shaft will go in, the spare will go in from the passenger side. It'll slide on 2 carbon rods that span the distance of the inside of the plate to the inside of the plate on the driver's side. Those rods will be guide rods. So, you know, think about popping it through this opening, going in there, instead of having trying to keep it level, it just goes shh, and those rods will guide it right into a register for the U-joint on that side, and click, and then this side will just go down and you'll pin it and it's done. And it'll just be streamlined like that. The reason I chose rods is because the exit air from the radiator is going to be, you know, coming right into this area. And if we put some kind of I mean, first off, the most primitive way would be like a tube. Oh, just put it in the tube and it'll go through there. And then you think, oh, well, maybe not a tube, maybe half of it, or a cradle, you know, or a saddle. But then that's taking up space where air can pass through. And I thought, well, just drill it or make something that's just airy. But the best thing to do is just have 2 carbon rods that go across that are just a slide for it. Almost like at like old arcades where you'd see like the balls come down and they wouldn't actually have like a full track. They'd just have like little like chrome, you know, like piano rod guiding them. So same kind of concept. And then you're not wasting your space there. You're letting the air flow as much as it can. And those are huge brushless fans. So the real estate of a drive shaft, which is roughly what, 3 inches, is not going to do anything to hinder the air exiting. It's not in front of the radiator, it's behind it. So that's the thing. We'll have, you know, those rods will span across, just 1, 2. That's all it needs. And then it'll register in there. Kind of a bare bones situation here, but you really get an idea for the lacing of the chassis and kind of the center tube structure. That's kind of been the theme with like the whole car, is big kind of nasty structural sculpted plate on the outsides, and then just lacing, all tube lacing throughout, and it does that from front to back. But it's just, you kind of see the exhaust routing here, you see where the housing lives, see where the winch lives, and then you know, I think your eyes naturally want to do like a cross brace here, and that's exactly what this is going to do. This is going to be a really integral part of the chassis and the rigidity. But this is where I stand right here. The next steps are to complete the plate structures here that tie in the bump zone, tie in the sway bar mount, tie in the chassis here and triangulate this, and also tie in some of the sculpted area here. So this portion will be one big nice gusset that also incorporates the drive shaft mount. That's stuff to look forward to. Packaging on the sides of this thing, obviously it's pretty clear where the tire is at full compression and articulation. The other thing to think about is sway bar. So obviously the sway bar is going to go out from here and go in front of the axle. And then you get the doinks. So 3-inch by 4-inch stroke king bump stop. These are going to go in a nice home a little bit before the axle on their own pad at the appropriate angle. Bump stops hitting directly up and down unless the suspension is going completely up and down. This thing does swing on an arch, so I'm just going to make it hit exactly where it should. But that's something to look forward to. So I think next update, I don't know if these, I'm jonesing to put these on, but you know, got to apply patience where it's necessary. First things first, box all this, finish this structure, finish this structure, finish this structure. So all the plate work is done. Then I will weld and blend all this. I don't think there's any more that needs to be welded and blended. Everything will be kind of raw. And then we will solidify the tube work for the tires and kind of that holster for them and whatever other bracing needs to be in here. And then we can move to that. So I think you'll definitely be able to expect on the next update all finished plate work, all of this blended out, all of this fully boxed, so there's no empty weird stuff. Again, this hole, so this is like obviously a design feature, but this will also be for fuel lines. There'll be redundant fuel pumps and filters, and also redundant fuel fill. It'll just have a dry brake right into the top. So this guy will house our fuel lines to come out right here to where all the systems are going to be on each side, same mirror image. But you know, we'll detail all this stuff out. It'll be nice to kind of show you the mechanism of the drive shaft. I'm not going to finalize the end cap on the passenger side for the drive shaft just because I don't know the exact length yet. The drive shaft I'm using is for what we have here. I'm using a 10-inch with the underdrive, but we're going to be switching to a sequential, just a nasty transmission. So I want to kind of finalize that once I know what the final drive shaft is going to be and its length. But you know, this is kind of just the update of where we stand. Again, it's a process, but I just figured I'd kind of let you guys in on this thing and expose it for where it's at now, and then we can kind of take the journey of just following the updates to it. So thank you so much for watching. You know, like, comment, subscribe, enjoy your day.